Welcome. We are joined today by our visiting scholar, our resident scholar rather, Marc Dunkelman, who has just celebrated 1 year of Why Nothing Works,
Yeah.
and now in paperback.
Now in paperback.
So
Absolutely.
congratulations, Mark.
Thank you.
And welcome.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I wanna get right into sort of the central crux of your book, and it's a lot about how I think progressives have sort of lost the plot in terms of how government in your way can be best prosecuted for the public good. I love
Yeah.
how you term that. You talk about sort of Jeffersonian and Hamiltonian approaches to this. Could you explain a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah. So from the very beginning, when the progressive movement emerges in the late 1800s, we are faced with sort of this big challenge, which is that big industrial trusts are bulldozing American society, the American economy. It's bad news bears. And there are essentially two approaches you could take in that situation to resolving things and protecting the public. One is to say, let's break up these trusts. Let's go back to the 19th century economy of small businesses that were all competing on Main Street. And like that's essentially what Louis Brandeis wanted to do. We create the Sherman Antitrust Act in the late 1800s. And the idea there is, you've got a aluminum trust, a railroad trust, a sugar trust, break them up, and that will restore the relative prosperity of previous generation. The second approach is to say, no. Like, it's the industrial age. These companies are more efficient when they're bigger. These are big, multinational or certainly cross-continental enterprises. What you need is a strong regulatory body to watch over them, and that actually that's the ICC is the first bureaucracy created by the federal government to be a regulatory bureaucracy, the Interstate Commerce Corporation, and that's to deal with these railroad trusts. And there's sort of a debate within progressivism at that time between those who want to take that first approach, which I call Jeffersonian, in the sense that we're trying to take power as it is concentrated and return it back down, or alternatively, we want to create strong centralized public institutions like the ICC, which will regulate the railroads so that they can't just sort of charge exorbitant fees or ram their tracks through crowded neighborhoods or whatnot. And that's a Hamiltonian approach. That's a strong central government. That Alexander Hamilton wanted a robust
One of my
centralized government.
favorite figures in U.S. history, based on sort of the approach to governance and the authority with which he approached sort of these structures. Like, nope, I understand how this needs to work, and everyone else just sort of needs to listen to me.
Correct. So right. So even in the way that you just articulated that, you see the downside of Hamiltonianism, which is that it's like some dude or potentially a woman, right, telling everybody I'm taking control here and I'm going to do this stuff and I don't care what you say, I'm going to do it. And that is the downside. And then the downside of the Brandeisian approach is well, you need economies of scale and like some of these if you're trying to send grain from the port of Boston to Europe, you want to be able to contract with a single railroad to go from Indiana to Boston. Otherwise, if there are lots of little railroads, they're transferring the grain over and over again, and that's extremely expensive. And so, there are downsides to both the Jeffersonian and the Hamiltonian approach. They are both progressive, though, right? That they're both born from this notion that the world as it is could be better, and we need an intervention to make sure that it serves marginalized people, the middle class, ordinary people, the public interest. For the first 2/3 of the progressive story, the Hamiltonian narrative is predominant. It's not that we are doing some antitrust stuff in the Brandeisian Jeffersonian mold, but for the most part, from the Wilson administration through the Johnson administration. So, right, that's the teens through the 60s. Our view is if you got a big problem, you should find a competent, well-mannered, thoughtful, educated bureaucrat, generally like a white dude in a fedora.
Right. Always a fedora.
Always a fedora, and preferably with an Ivy League education.
Correct.
And have that dude make decisions on everyone's behalf. And like a lot of people, including a lot of the sort of, people that would now be considered swing voters, like that seemed to make sense to them, right? Like the New Deal had helped them through the Great Depression, like the big military buildup of World War II, like we defeated fascism together, like with these fedora wearing bureaucrats in Washington, and then you get to the 60s, and the boomers come of age, and like they're just have a different cultural viewpoint, and their viewpoint is these guys aren't so great. They're like they've polluted the environment. They've done
Plunged us into wars.
They pulled us into the Vietnam War. They've built urban highways. They've done urban renewal. There's a oil spill off of Santa Barbara. The Cuyahoga River is on fire.
Demolishing communities just to build interstates.
New York City almost goes bankrupt, like lots of other public, like there's all this evidence that this establishment, and like that really is a thing. These establishment figures who are always in power, even as elected officials come and go. That the establishment is itself. Some people thought it was like fundamentally evil. Other people are just like it's out of touch or it's not competent. And so the Jeffersonian tradition of American progressivism, which had been there right from the beginning, really like finds its footing. And you see in the 60s and 70s just a completely different progressivism emerge, a progressivism that says wherever there is power, we are going to speak truth to it. And our general supposition is that you show me a situation, tell me who's powerful, and I am going to call them out and try to return that power to ordinary people who that powerful person is trampling. And like in lots of cases, that was the case, right? Like there are lots of minority communities that existed all over the country where some white guy in a fedora came in and said, we're going to build a highway here, or we're going to evict you all and clear the space so that a developer can build sky rises. Like that's it was a reasonable response to the establishment being like that. And so the Hamiltonian notion of progressivism, like without anyone ever explicitly saying that the Democratic Party or the progressive movement is going to abandon that notion, and in fact, in some ways, we hold on to it. Like there are examples of us still having Hamiltonian impulses during, like, in the course of the 50, 60 years since then. Like, the progressive movement has become synonymous with this Jeffersonian impulse. And I wrote this book, Why Nothing Works, a year ago, explicitly not to sort of say, like, one of these is the one and true progressivism, but to say, like, this is a battle not between D's and R's or the left and the right, but within the broader progressive world. Everybody from, Mondami to Manchin. Like we are all having these debates all the time within ourselves. And in most cases, we don't even think about it this way.
We don't acknowledge it, really.
We don't. We will go from a moment where we want to protect civil rights or reproductive rights or the rights of such and such a community, which is a Jeffersonian impulse, to one in which we want a powerful government bureaucracy to tell these corporate polluters to stop emitting carbon into our atmosphere, which is an explicitly Hamiltonian endeavor. And we won't even notice that we've gone from one to the other. Like it's just... and so that our own self-perception is essentially messed up.
I want to talk about that because I feel like that is a very specific dynamic that's at play in, definitely in current Democratic Party politics, where there seems to be these camps, right? You sort of see it very much present on internet discourse where I spend too much time, where you sort of have we'll call it the abundance camp, where it's like, we need more healthcare, we need more clean energy, and you have to sort of build these things quickly and efficiently. We need more housing, right? And you have to, if there are statutes or things that are in the way of that, we should not let those things be the impediment to building a more abundant society, right? So you have that. Then you have the neo-Brandesians, these people who are, I think, the heirs to some of these individuals that you speak to in the book, where it's very much I'm antitrust first, and I am skeptical of anything that smacks of lack of regulation or trying to make these things sort of occur more rapidly. And I feel like, and please, because I've been dying to get your answer to this. I feel like in the discourse and in sort of definitely in the online discourse and in some of the political elite discourse, there seems to be this tension, but it feels to me that is a forced tension. It feels to me that these camps have hardened themselves because, someone wants to win out, or someone thinks that the only kind of progressive to be is sort of this, this neo-Brandesian progressive. And I say it's forced because I feel like the examples we get, go to Mamdani. Obviously, he sort of front-loaded his campaign with a deeply populist message around, expanding access to things and making things, somewhat free and freezing the rent in some of these instances. And then on the back end of it, once he gets into office and starts governing, there is this deeply, all right, we're going to deregulate some things. We're going to cut through some red tape here. We're going to, plow through certain city regulations to help people, get jobs, shoveling the snow when we need to. And so to me, it was the deepest expression of, oh, you need both. And I think it's just a conversation of calibration. And I feel like right now, especially in the elite spaces, there doesn't seem to be a desire to calibrate. I wonder if you feel the same.
I think you're totally right. And I've put just a lot of thought into this because it surprised me when Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein came out with Abundance and there was this backlash against it.
Yeah. Surprised me too.
Yeah. I think what's happened is that we have certainly among the elites, there is a muscle memory.
Yeah.
Which is to say that we have had fights for the last 30, 40 years about whether the party should go left or moderate. And, those fights are extensive and probably well documented, but there's sort of one school of thought saying if you go left, you will find latent voters who don't come out because they've failed to be inspired by leadership, and so we need to go left, and there'll be a naturally occurring Democratic majority,
a permanent one.
And then others say, no, there are all these swing voters who were the, Nixon's silent majority or the Reagan Democrats or now the Obama Trump voters, and we need to win them over. And that debate has sort of shaped our outlook and our debate so that the titration that we're always trying to do is try to figure out, do we need to head left or head to the center? That's not actually what this debate is. What people are trying to do is graft abundance onto the old moderate camp and graft Brandesianism onto the old left. You want to connect, Jesse Jackson calling the DLC Democrats of the leisure class in the 80s, right? That would Jesse Jackson would theoretically be Brandesian. And Bill Clinton or the more moderate figures being Joe Biden being on the moderate side. But the issue here is that in this Hamiltonian Jeffersonian debate, it's not more left to be want to be the abundance nicks are not against using monopoly power to bring corporate abuse to heel. And I also the almost stranger. It's it's not as if the Brandesians who want to cut down corporate power aren't for theoretically centralizing and making government work where centralized power is needed to
Right.
create a better school system
Right.
or like replace lead pipes
Right.
in like they're not like, and so like we're sort of having this shadow debate
Right.
about whether we should head to the left or the center, when really the question is like, if we're going to do things,
Right.
like how do we balance
Right.
this idea of getting big things done, as the old Hamiltonian tradition was able to do,
Right.
without bulldozing people and polluting the environment and ignoring the interests of, of tribes that have sacred ground. Like,
Right.
how do we balance these things so that we're not always saying no because there's an objection,
Right.
and also not just saying yes without listening to anyone because like some guy in a fedora said he wanted to.
Right.
And like, so we've grafted an old familiar debate onto something that should be considered completely new.
And it just exactly that's exactly right. I feel like, and this is why I sometimes feel like I'm going crazy when I try and just participate in some of the discourse, because it feels like that people are just talking past each other, and they do not understand. And you get at this in the book that these impulses are in tension with one another, but that's sort of by design. They sort of need to be, in a way that you get to a balance, you get to a calibration or a titration, as you just said. I think in the modern sense, I think there are lots of lessons that each of these sort of camps can learn from each other. And I feel like, just to be blunt about it, Democrats have been at their best when they borrow a little bit from each camp to sort of to appeal to as broad of a swath of individuals as possible. One of the things that I think you said this in a book or in an interview, you were talking about how the sort of the central question within the progressive movement needs to be about making government work better. Like, if you can actually, center that in sort of your zeitgeist, then you will prevent people from kind of falling prey to the populist right. And that was so resonant with me, because I feel like we've gotten away from that. We've gotten away from these basic questions of government competency and making these things that function, that actually interact with people's lives regularly. We've gotten away from like making those things function with a sense of excellence. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that there's sort of been this moving away, or maybe even downplaying some of the things about government that do not work right now? Why do we feel like we're not sort of shining a light on that?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. The first is the right is constantly telling everybody, as Reagan said, the scariest words in the English dictionary are, I'm from the government,
Right.
and I'm here to help.
And then Bill Clinton built off of that, right? He says the era of big government is over, right?
But don't but people don't remember about that quote is that he immediately then said, but we can't go back to everyone being on their own. So he was trying to balance it.
Mm-hmm.
I think at core, the reason that Democrats haven't focused on government competence is because for 50 years, our abiding impulse, just the overwhelming impulse, has been to speak truth to power.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not we acknowledged it, it's not just corporate power that we were trying to speak truth to.
Right.
We were trying to speak truth to the housing authority that is not keeping up the various projects or the various neighborhoods that it's responsible for. We're speaking truth to the water authority that is charging too much and not providing reliable, safe drinking water.
Right.
We're speaking truth to the legislators who have created tax breaks for wealthy corporations that force middle class or working class people to pay more to make up the difference. And so the sort of we've become so accustomed to speaking truth to power that and we've become so sort of, the term I tried to coin in the book was, we've become culturally averse to power, that we lost sight of this notion that when we have power, or if government is the instrument we want to use so that we can make the better future that we imagine,
Right.
you can't just be against that power as well. That institution needs to work. And like the thing, I mean, this is the political argument that I think often comes at the end of these sort of discussions of like how power should work, how government should work. Like in a world where government doesn't work, where, you know, your mother-in-law is driving down the highway and says they still haven't reopened that bridge. It's driving me bananas.
Yeah.
Well, like a guy comes along saying, I am the tool of your vengeance.
Yeah.
I think that there is a deep state
Right.
that is responsible for all this. We are all getting a bad deal.
And I alone can fix it.
I alone can fix it, and I'm going to tear it all down. Like that's got an appeal, even if that guy is like heinous in every way, and you wouldn't invite him into your home, you know, to save your life. Here's a guy that isn't part of the broken establishment that left the bridge broken for way too long, or failed to clean up the thing, or knocked down a whole bunch of homes with the idea that something was going to be built there, and then nothing got built. Like we are the party of government.
Yeah.
Like Democrats are the party that wants to use government to do good things.
Right.
And we need to realize we're being judged
Right.
on the efficacy of the institution that we claim can be a boon for ordinary working class, middle class people.
Right.
And if it's not going to work, people are going to look for an alternative. You get a lousy hamburger at one restaurant.
You go somewhere else.
You go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And the guy that says, I'm going to tear down all the lousy restaurants has got an appeal. And so, like, you know, I find, you know, when I talk to people who are just forlorn about Trump and can't believe it, and they look at what he's saying and they say, you know, I'm just so nervous about the next election. Is he going to come back? Are more people like him? Like,
Yeah.
and the sort of supposition is in a lot of those conversations, there's just nothing we can do. Like
We're helpless.
we're helpless. Like this guy's it's almost like a virus,
Yeah.
and it's taking over.
Yeah.
And like there's nothing. Well, there are things that we can do.
Right.
And like that's what Searchlight, I think, that's why I wanted to come to Searchlight, was like, this is a place that is saying, like, what are some actual practical things?
Right.
Because as much as there can be a vicious cycle of people tearing things down because things don't work, and then things don't work more, so they want to tear things down again. Like there have been moments in American history where we've had virtuous cycles.
Right. And we have agency in this.
Yes.
I feel like, you know, one of the things I loved about your book is that I think it's probably one of the more introspective takes on sort of the broader global left that is on offer right now. And I feel like because there is a refusal to just do that broadly, that we kind of get stuck in this place of being very, very concerned and sort of, you know, oh, woe is me, you know, are we going to be dealing with this for, you know, on cycle? And it's like, well, you know, there was a reason why sort of Trump kind of demolished in 2016, you know, much to everyone's shock. Not everyone was shocked, but a lot of people were shocked. And then again in 2024, it's like this was fairly predictable, I think. And I think what Democrats have to do is be very honest about what the failures that led to it are. And I don't think there's a willingness to do that. To your point around, you know, just wanting to go left or center, that's not how people sort themselves. And that's not how definitely not how people experience, you know, government services and the things that, you know, we claim to be offering to improve people's lives. I wonder if you could speak to sort of how you think this argument and this kind of dynamic between, you know, modern Hamiltonians and modern Jeffersonians, how we resolve that. Like you get to some examples in the book around, you know, there are immigration courts that exist, or there are ways to kind of get at making government work better and making some of these systems that we've come to just kind of bounce around and sort of say, well, you know, that's just how it is. How do we move beyond sort of this, in my view, forced argument, so that we can actually make a proactive case of like, actually, we're not powerless in this. We can, you know, produce an alternative that is about government working and being the best version of itself.
So I think this is the $100,000 question. You know, let me give you this is where I think we are and where we need to go. And I think we here at Searchlight and others, I hope, outside of Searchlight will begin thinking more about this. If you imagine a situation where you've got a clean source of power here and a city here that wants to use clean power and, you know, get off its addiction to fossil fuels or oil power, you know, coal, gas. And between these two places are a neighborhood with expensive, historically preserved homes, a beautiful forest, and a poor neighborhood that has been, you know, marginalized and subject to redlining and whatnot. And you're going to have to build a transmission line from here to here. You got 4 options. Build it through the historically preserved homes and cut off a lot of, right? They give, you know, cut off a lot of land value and, right? Through a place where they're endangered species, people who have been battered by American history, or don't do it.
Yeah.
I don't think that we have, as progressives, not only is there not a good system for making that choice, I don't think that we can articulate what a process would be to make that choice.
Yeah.
And that should be a 5-alarm fire for us, because, you know, in the old days when Hamiltonianism ran amok, like, powerful men in fedoras would have made the choice on their own, and presumably it would have gone through the minority neighborhood.
Definitely.
Or and there would have been no protection for those folks. Maybe it would have gone through and ruined the forest. Like, those guys like to do that as well. And there was sort of no process, right? Today, we were when we realized that was happening, we put up all these protections. We made it so that you can't, historic preservation, endangered species, disparate impacts. We've created so that now anyone who doesn't like the transmission line going through their neighborhood or through can go to court and stop it. Now, both of those processes suck.
Yeah.
Like to use some right. Like you don't want a thing where no one has any recourse.
Right.
You don't want a thing where anyone can stop it.
Right.
Because we need to replace we need stuff.
Energy, right?
We need energy. Like we need to have faster trains. We need to have better mobility. We need housing in places where there isn't like there's stuff we need to do. Like down the line, we need to create a legal regulatory structure that allows for those decisions to be made. But before we can even do that, we need to have like real conversations among ourselves of like, what would be a fair process so that if you are someone who is worried about historic homes, endangered species, or disparate impacts, you will be okay when in some cases your interest doesn't prevail because you know that the broader public interest is prevailing, that in another case where there's a similar challenge is going to go through the another of the three, that is,
and it's transparent.
It's transparent. It's fair. You know, this is a little bit of a silly analogy, but like I am one of a very few Cincinnati Bengals fans in the entire world.
I'm so sorry.
Yes, no, it's been a long slog. So in the Super Bowl a few years ago, like we were going to win, and the refs made a bad call on a pass interference play near the end of the game. And like if you look at the replay, like it's just a terrible, like objectively.
How often do you look through the replay?
I try to avoid it because then I'm morose for like a week. But like the rules of the game are the ref makes the play, and there's certain plays that can be reviewed, and there's certain that they can't. And like I accept that we lost the Super Bowl, and I'm excited about the off-season acquisitions we've had, and like I'm looking forward to next year. But we've moved on, and like we'll play again, and like ultimately we need to have some sort of system where it is not the end of the world when we make one of these trade-offs. Frankly, and this is how the abundance conversation, I think, and the people in our world, and I say this sort of this small world of think tanks and thinkers and writers who are thinking about how to do more stuff, how to build state capacity. In too many cases, we create sort of we pick the absurdist examples, like somebody wants to build housing on an abandoned lot, and it's going to have some disabled veterans in it, set aside for disabled veterans, and so the people down the street who own a restaurant are worried about these disabled veterans on the sidewalk discouraging foot traffic into the restaurant, so they use an environmental statute to stop. Right, and you're like no one is on the side of those restaurant owners, right? Like that's an absurd example, and it suggests that we need some sort of reform on the environmental law to prevent that. Like that there's a clear good and a clear bad, and but sitting here right now with you, like I probably have some emotional feelings about where that electric line should go, like what it should bisect.
Sure,
but like I don't know that I've got. There's if you picked one of the solutions, it's not clearly right and the other two clearly wrong.
Right, they're trade-offs.
These are trade-offs, and we need to be getting people to a place where, like, when there are trade-offs, people have some faith that the government is making them, with the best of intentions,
in a thoughtful way, in a way that's taking in hopefully all of the relevant facts and information.
Yes,
and at least getting to again a transparent call where after the call is made, we can agree that we can move on as much as the call might hurt. I think this sort of speaks to this concept of the vetocracy that you refer to, and to me, it feels like that is sort of the principal obsession of policymakers on the left right now. Basically, figuring out ways to bake process into a policy such that actually the thing doesn't really get done. I've sat across so many legislative conversations of like how we figure out how we're going to mitigate this, or like how we're going to tackle this particular issue, or how we're going to make sure that this this energy thing gets done. That process seems to be more of the obsession than the actual outcome. I feel like that needs to change, and that we need to figure out a way to break out of this mindset of being far more obsessed with the process than the outcome. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with it. I would add, you are absolutely right that we on the left have spent the last 40 years saying and thinking to each other, how do we change the process so that this bad thing that happened doesn't? So that a coal mine is not built where an endangered species lived, or what is the terrible thing that we're trying to avoid?
Right.
Now, interestingly, even among people who probably think like you and me, we are in many cases thinking, how can we change the process once again, so that this thing is built by right rather than not being built, right? We are again sort of thinking like, let's eliminate this regulation so that it is easier to build high voltage transmission lines, which we want to do because like that's going to reduce our carbon emissions.
Right.
Rather than saying, we need to create a process whereby we think about the trade-offs that would come in any case where someone proposes a transmission line and that has costs. Like, you're a recovering hill rat, so am I, and like in the room where it happens, it is people like you and your peers working for other senators who are working through the details of like, what if we change the language to say this?
Right.
What if we change the formula a little bit this way? What if we added an addendum saying you cannot take, and it's almost like we are trying to predetermine what happens inside an office building a block away from the Capitol.
Right.
That's going to happen, in New Mexico or in Colorado or far away. And really what you want is to create some sort of mechanism within the public sector where we are looking at these things, taking in public input, the the end result is not predetermined.
Right.
But we have a fair deliberative process that gives everyone a voice, no one a veto, and then you deliberate, and like people closer to the scene can deliver.
Right.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard to do. And I certainly don't know exactly, how it will work in every realm of public policy.
Sure.
But I think that as progressives, our goal should be, rather than saying never build a single lane of any kind of vehicular traffic in any place that is a public greenway, including a golf course, right? Like it needs to be like, in some cases, we're going to need to build railroad tracks through a public golf course because we want to make it so that fewer people are driving.
Right.
Like that's not something that can be determined in the language of a bill. It needs to be determined through the language or through the negotiation that would happen around the project itself. And that means empowering someone to choose and actually deliver.
Right. I have two more things I want to ask you.
Hit me.
And one of them is sort of a news of the day. I saw reports very recently that certain Democrats are thinking that there is no real path towards permitting reform for clean energy projects under the Trump administration. I'm of the opinion, and I think Searchlight is of the opinion, that there needs to be some sort of open and consistent dialogue around permitting reform. Like, let's say in 2029, there's a trifecta that wants to pursue more clean energy. We think that permitting reform being done before 2029 would actually hasten the quicker deployment of that clean energy. Do you think it's a mistake for Democrats to just swear off any sort of negotiation on this front while Trump is president?
I'm not close enough to the negotiations themselves.
Sure.
I have noted. I have noted that one of the reasons the Democrats are not sitting at the table anymore is that they can't get reassurance from the Republicans that if they proceed with permitting reform, Trump won't just cut off all clean energy projects and only provide permits to dirty projects. So, for instance, we had fully contracted wind farms in New England, and Trump has, at the last minute,
bribing the people not to build.
Yes, and like lots of federal taxpayer dollars have gone out to companies, and we're not going to get the benefit of the doubt. So, like we essentially burned taxpayer funding. But to take a step back, the implicit critique is we don't want a president choosing which projects to move forward with. And so then the question for us is, if we don't want the president choosing, who should choose which projects go? Should it be the courts? I mean, like that's been our answer for a long time. And now, people are noticing the courts are almost always a no, right? Should it be should we go back to members of Congress individually earmarking things, or we hated the bridge to nowhere on the left. Like we were furious that a couple of members of the Appropriations Committee could
just
spend $1 billion on infrastructure that would never. So like, I think that we need to have a theory on who should get to say yes and no to these things, and whether or not a permitting reform bill passes during the Trump years. We need to have like a serious conversation among ourselves about how we imagine permitting happening in a fair way so that we can do that once we're back in power. Because right now, just sort of the sort of hot potato approach to permitting reform, which is like, well, I don't like what the president's choosing, so I'm going to say, no, we can't choose. We're going to have another branch of government choose. And then when we see what they do, be angry about that. You're like that's a crap way to be a progressive. And so I think we need a sort of more comprehensive, thoughtful answer. And I think that's what Searchlight's working towards. It's certainly what I'm thinking about almost every day.
Definitely. Last thing.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed with the Army Corps of Engineers. It is perhaps one of my favorite agencies, particularly because they get at a little bit of what you talk about, where it's they take into consideration community interests. They take into consideration, the complexity of a project. They take into consideration sort of their available resources with what they're able to do, and then sort of tell Congress, hey, here's what we're able to do. You guys tell us what you want us to do. I think that's a bit of a model for how some of this stuff can work. And again, having worked for a Washington State member doesn't always work out well.
Yeah.
But there's at least sort of a process that's established. And at the end of the day, usually people walk away being like, all right, didn't like everything that happened there, but the process happened.
Yeah.
I wonder, if you could speak to an agency that either exists right now or existed in the past that could maybe point the way towards how things could be done in the future.
I mean, I think that's a super, like the Army Corps is very interesting because, in the Carter administration, the Army Corps was reviled for having ties to members of Congress who are asking them to build useless dams just so those members of Congress could have their names adorned on a big public work. And since then, the Army Corps has changed its way. So it's sort of a positive example, like to the degree that you, as having worked for a member of the Washington State delegation, now hold it up as an example.
Yeah.
Someone just wrote today a long piece about how the Fed works. Like the Fed is sort of an example. Like there's an agency with some independence. They get to set these interest rates. They are, now this is a contentious issue. I frequently use the example of the FBI. If the Directorate of Counterintelligence or Counterterrorism in Washington is super worried about a threat and they want resources around the country to be deployed against this threat in the immediate term, and the special agent in charge of one of the field offices is like 1 day away from finishing their, 1 week away from finishing an investigation, and doesn't want to give those agents, move those agents off into something else, like the two of them will discuss it and hopefully resolve some compromise. If they can't, the issue is raised up to the director, and the director weighs the costs and benefits of doing what the special agent in charge wants, or the deputy in charge of counterterrorism wants, and figures out the right deployment of human capital. And that's the expectation, I think, in these other realms, is that we're thinking about we need to get clean energy. Like these are the ways that we can do it. Who ultimately chooses? And so the truth is that you're asking for examples in government. Those are some examples of government. We all, in our own lives, when our families are choosing where to go to dinner, when we go to the office and the boss has to choose between which product is going to be put out front of the store this coming season versus what's going to be held back. Like we are all making decisions all the time, and we have processes for doing it. Like it's sort of almost, it's second nature. There's a patient on a surgical gurney, and there are 3 different surgeons with different specialties, all debating what should the next thing in the surgery be. Like they have some protocol for choosing, and we don't have that. But it's not some foreign concept to the American psyche. In fact, this is sort of the thing that Tocqueville most lauded us for in the early 19th century.
We can pick things. We can figure this out.
Correct. And we can do it in associations, and we don't need some dictator to tell us. Even when we hate the person next to us, if we're both going to be threatened by the flood, we're going to work out some association so that we are building a barrier together. This is in fact the magic of America. And it's been shrouded for a bit, but this is the promise of progressivism, and I'm very confident that we can bring it back.
So am I.
Great.
Thanks, Mark.
We'll do it together.
We will.